Right, so here we go with embracing AI. Being as I'm chairing the day and giving the introductory talk, do I give myself an introduction? Miles Berry needs no introduction, he's not going to get one or whatever. So let me show you this. So this is what you get from, if you type, who is Miles Berry, what does he know about AI in education, into an older version now of ChatGPT. It doesn't actually make anything up here. There is nothing on here which is, strictly speaking, false. It's generally kind and complimentary, and I'm going to take that, thank you very much, but it misses out really, really interesting and important details. So I did 18 years working across 4 different schools, 3 years as a head teacher, which was really quite enough, thank you very much. And my job now, as I've hinted already, is training the next generation of outstanding teachers at the University of Roehampton. They let me out to do other interesting things. So as part of the panel that put together England's computing curriculum last time round, blame me, thank me, depending on your perspective on that. Right, our theme for the day is embracing AI. And I'm really curious what that conjures up in your mind. Do you see these chatbots, ChatGPT and Copilot and Gemini and all of that, as very much Baymax there from Big Hero 6 giving you a warm and friendly embrace and looking after you and helping you with the things in your school? Or do you see it rather more as the Terminator over on the right hand side? Admittedly, it's from Terminator 2, when, just like Sarah Connor, I was somewhat surprised that the Terminator was a goodie in that film. But even so, where is your position on this? This is really, really scary technology, or this is actually incredibly helpful, beneficial technology. I will do a show of hands now and we'll return to this later. So if you are more of ChatGPT is like Baymax, hands up please. Thank you very much. If you feel ChatGPT is much more like the Terminator in the first film, hands up please. Okay, Skynet has become self-aware and has refused to be turned off. Okay, we'll see how this goes. I've shared with that already. So I was asked to give you a very, very quick, set a timer at this point because otherwise it will not be very quick because there's a load of stuff to talk about, update on where we are in terms of DfE policy and similar sorts of things. Across government as a whole, there are these 5 regulatory principles which apply to the use of generative AI, and indeed AI generally, across the public sector. Safety, security, robustness, transparency and explainability, fairness, accountability, governance, contestability and redress. If you're putting together your own school's AI policy, I'd say start with these things. Most of you are working in public sector organisations, and so these regulatory principles should apply to your school, your trust, just as they do to like Department of Work and Pensions or whatever. And the reason why you should start with this is what our friends at Ofsted, okay, that normally gets a cheer, but never mind. Okay, normally what our friends at Ofsted will be expecting you to have put in place. They're not going to be looking at how effective is your use of AI, but they will be, I think, expecting you to have taken some charge for policy and governance around this, and they're starting with that list of 5 things, just as big parts of the public sector do too. And to be fair, Ofsted are holding themselves accountable for this as well, so they have to be transparent in their use of AI. We're not expecting any use of AI to generate inspection reports anytime soon. But I think if Ofsted were to look at a whole set of inspection reports and try and get generative AI to identify common themes there, nobody would feel, no, that needs an HMI to actually get personally involved. DfE are really quite enthusiastic about this and put together 4 million of public sector funding to build up this content store of trusted public sector content on which large language models could be fine-tuned or could do retrieval augmented generation based on stuff which has already been paid for out of the public purse. So that is all of the curriculum guidance, all of the stuff in the core content framework, everything which they've got of what good lesson plans look like, as well as anonymized samples of pupils' work. For those of you on the secondary tables, as far as I can tell, it doesn't include exam specs, exam papers, mark schemes, or examiners' reports, which seems a huge shame, as actually having access to that in a centralized way would make sense. They've also funded a number of pilot projects just to, see what we can do with this, all very much focused on helping teachers with workload. So a lesson plan or activity adapter, and we're going to hear from colleagues at Oak about how far they've got with producing lesson plans on their trusted content, and also the feedback and revision activity generator. And we're seeing pilot projects with this. So you'll hear more about Isla later on, but it's an awesome tool for producing lesson plans and resources. And this is this essay feedback tool, originally just proof of concept, year 4 writing. Tell it what the essay, the story was about, give it the pupil's work in machine readable format, and then crank the handle and see what feedback it gives. Very, very detailed feedback for the teacher. You will notice this is even more detailed, longer than the story the child wrote was. And then feedback designed for the pupil themselves, based on what we have in core content ECT frameworks around what good feedback looks like. Bridget Phillipson did the opening speech for this year's BET show. The Prime Minister said last week that AI is a force for change that will transform the lives of working people for the better. Very much of that sort of Baymax disposition rather than the Terminator. Keir gets it, I get it. Okay, so that's because we know the true value of harnessing technology. The world of even 5 years ago is gone forever. Already a lost, obsolete age. Think back to your teaching. Okay, 2020 is not a good year to pick as an example here, but February 2020 it was still just about okay, wasn't it? Do you feel your working life has changed dramatically from how you were teaching, how your pupils were learning in Feb 2020? I don't know as the world of 5 years ago has changed that much. So this is a BET speech. She says harnessing technology, and I am now old enough to remember Ruth Kelly launching the E-strategy, harnessing technology, 20 years ago now. She talked about what we could do with online learning. It will be more than simply a storage place, a digital space that's personalized, remembers what the learner is interested in, suggests relevant websites or alerts them to courses and learning opportunities that fit their needs. 20 years ago, that was absolutely a pipe dream. Yeah, we were nowhere near that. But 20 years on, I think we are very, very close to here is a portfolio of a pupil's work. Here are the next steps. Here are the next resources for them. Oh, and do you want to hear from Michael Gove? No, the answer is definitely no, but.
The fundamental model of school education is still, in many classrooms, a teacher talking to a group of pupils. It's barely changed over the centuries, even since Plato established the earliest academia in a shady olive grove in ancient Athens. If you took a Victorian school teacher into a 21st century classroom, in many schools in the country, he or she would feel completely at home. Whiteboards may have eliminated chalk dust, chairs may have migrated from rows to groups, but a teacher still stands in front of the class, talking, testing, questioning. But we all in this room know that model won't be the same in 20 years' time. It may well be extinct in 10.
I do not think the pace of educational change is nearly as rapid as Michael Gove and Bridget Phillipson seem to think it would be. Alongside Phillipson's BET speech was also the update to DfE policy guidance around generative AI in education. It has changed a lot since the first draft. Back in 2023, it was really, really forward-thinking, very much, there is this new technology, let's think about how education can make best use of this. There was stuff in there about pupils of today need to be trained, taught how to use AI, how to use these technologies. They've stepped back a long way from that point now. This is much more focused on doing things which will help teachers with their busy working lives, of lesson planning, sometimes feedback, sometimes report writing, sometimes assessment. This is all about teacher-facing technologies, creating educational resources, lesson, curriculum planning, tailored feedback revision, administrative tasks, supporting personalised learning. So we're moving to this is something for teachers. The other half of the guidance say, you've got to be really, really careful now if you want kids using these tools themselves. It's too early. We don't know the risks. We don't know, this risk that so many of us worry about the child stops learning things because the AI can do all of these things is very high up on DFE's thinking about this now. And of course, the safety and the data and the intellectual property and all of that. So a much more precautionary approach from DFE as of 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now. And one of the things they say is you've got to keep to the terms and conditions. So those of you who are sat on the primary tables, none of your pupils should legally be using these technologies as things stand, because all of the language models and usually the end user conditions for the stuff which has APIs in place are all about they have to be over the age of 13. So if you are using it with primary school kids themselves, really do your due diligence on this. It's probably not allowed, but please check, don't take my word for it. Up in secondary, over the age of 13, with parental consent, the tools do become available to them. I suspect those of you around the secondary tables will have at least one pupil in mind who you think may have lied about their age in order to get one of these TikTok accounts. Yeah? It's possible they've done a similar thing to get access to these tools. So pupils' own use of this is going to be happening outside of school. One of our roles as educators is to teach them how to use this, yes, safely, but also effectively, efficiently, ethically, those responsibilities. They won't just learn that for themselves, I don't think. You had just before Bridget Phillipson's BET speech the announcement from the Prime Minister about the AI Opportunities Action Plan. Not quite sure what an action plan is, but we've got one now. And I think we have a Prime Minister who sees this as a tremendous opportunity to get the UK right at the forefront of this, to steam ahead and do something about UK economy using these technologies. Hidden in the list of 50 recommendations, when you get as far as recommendation 19, there's a thing about we need to develop AI literacy, we need to develop AI skills. Much of that is going to happen in FE and post-school, post-sixth form level, but some of that may well impact. And whilst there was a manifesto commitment and Becky Francis's curriculum and assessment review says digital skills for all, the thing from the Prime Minister's office on the 13th of January was digital and AI skills for all. So I would not be surprised if when curriculum and assessment review reports, there is some acknowledgement that AI needs to be part of the curriculum in school. And again, the further detail of this is go and have a look what's happening in South Korea. And political leaders saying take an example from South Korea is courageous, but South Korea is integrating AI, data, digital literacy throughout its education policy, and this notion of a pipeline there around these three things seems to be, a point of inspiration for what we do here. Over in the European Union, they have an EU AI Act, the first provisions of which took effect 12 days ago on the 2nd of February. One of those first provisions is a law which says if you're going to use AI tools in your organization, then you've got to train the people using those AI tools. This does not seem crazy European Union centralized bureaucracy imposing unreasonable demands. This seems an entirely sensible thing to do. I worry that we start to see divergence between what happens here in Great Britain and what happens in the European Union around stuff like this. This is not law here. It is law when you get to mainland Europe and the south of Ireland. What we do have, though, is Government Digital Service has said, right, OK, let's sort this out for all government departments. In fact, let's do this more broadly. Let's think about this across the whole of the public sector. I started with those 5 principles. These have expanded into a list of 10 things now. This AI playbook that they produced earlier this week, it's fabulous. It starts with what even is AI. It talks about how this would apply to general civil servants doing their job, and then also talks about those who are in positions where they're commissioning these systems. Really, really good advice, very, very accessible, and 10 very funky posters that you can put up around your IT room if you want. Right, okay, couple of things I just want to talk to you about before I hand over to Sunny. So what about things that you can do as teachers, as school leaders, in the day-to-day job? Sunny's going to talk about this a lot more, but we've got so many tools around now. Can anybody name all 6 of these platforms? Okay, so the top row I think are likely to be reasonably familiar. You've got ChatGPT, who were first to market, still very, very popular. You've got Claude, which is well worth experimenting with if you haven't already. And of course, Gemini from our friends at Google. You've also got Copilot from Microsoft. Copilot is like their version of ChatGPT. It's using the same GPT language model, but it has a Microsoft layer on top of it. If you're a Google school, it's hard not to use Gemini. If you're a Microsoft school, why would you choose anything other than Copilot as your standard go-to tool for this? Work with the ecosystem that you're already using. Middle one on the bottom is the logo for Llama. Llama is an open source language model from Facebook, of all people, or Meta. You can download this, you can install it on your laptop, or more reasonably, a big server somewhere in your school, and run this without an internet connection. Install it on a laptop, turn the Wi-Fi off, don't let people plug things in, well, maybe let them plug things into it, like electricity, but you've got entirely local model. If you're worried about data protection, you're running this in a secure, controlled environment. And then the technology moves so quickly. You get DeepSeek from a firm in China that does the whole thing that ChatGPT seems to have done for a fraction of the cost. If you're worried about the environmental impact, have a look at DeepSeek. And again, DeepSeek is an open model. You can download it, install it on your laptop, run it locally. Some of you are in schools that do the flipped learning thing. You make the kids watch the video before the lesson so you can get into really interesting discussions and practical work, and it turns out they never watched the video. So what are you going to do? Give the transcript of the video to ChatGPT, say, give me some multiple choice questions on this, and it does a very fine job of producing multiple choice questions. If you prompt it and say, I don't want them to be able to answer this unless they have watched the video, its distractors will be entirely appropriate for that. If you then say, give me this in a CSV format with these column headings, it will do exactly what you said. It's very good at transforming text from one form to another. Once you've got it in the right sort of table, bring it into Kahoot, because almost everybody other than me loves a Kahoot, I'm told, okay? There's a thing called, Brisk, which is a Chrome extension with seriously demanding privacy permissions. Do check your terms and conditions there, which will take the content of any web page and produce a tutor-style chatbot based on that, in the form that your pupils could scan the QR code and interact with the chatbot, each individually. You as the teacher get a report of this. I really worry about the privacy issues there. If you're wanting pupils to have that sort of individualized experience, Brisk is very good at doing this. And of course, the lovely, awesome Notebook LM, which does this retrieval augmented generation. If here is a corpus of text, make me something on this. Notebook LM makes this so accessible. If you do not care about exam board's intellectual property rights, you could give it all of the past papers, you could give it the exam spec, you could give it the examiner's report and say, now spin up for me a question on this specification in the style of these questions. Do check the copyright rules about this. And again, doing this at scale with exam boards, look at the Living in Our World section of the specification, create 5 different exam questions based on this. It is very easy to do this, as long as you've got access to the content, and then give me the mark scheme that relates to this question that you have just written. For those of you who are in the room thinking, I'm way ahead of where Miles is, do have a go at making your own one of these things, creating your own custom chatbot or gem, or whatever the equivalent in the Microsoft ecosystem is. This is a screenshot of Google's AI Studio, which I'm getting very excited about at the moment, because they've got a fine-tuned language model available that understands teaching. So rather than just its language, this is language for teaching, language for learning. Learn LM is what they're calling it. And you give it the instructions of what sort of bot you want to make, give it some content, and then it engages in a conversation around that. If you're inside the Google ecosystem and are paying the £20 a month or whatever premium it is, then the Learning Coach inside one of their custom gems will do pretty much the same thing with a much more easy to work interface. They're also upfront about how they've trained Learn LM, what their pedagogic principles are, that LearnLM seems to have learnt that learning should be active, that you shouldn't overwhelm them with too much cognitive load. Forgive me this morning. That there's a whole thing about teaching them how to learn that matters, and then good old-fashioned pedagogic strategies like constructivism and scaffolding. And then other things on questioning. So I get recordings of pretty much all of my lectures at Roehampton. I'm very, very happy to ask ChatGPT to give me feedback on how I've been teaching, to pick out how I've used questioning in my lectures, to give me advice on how to get better at this. Personally, I feel way more comfortable ChatGPT reading the transcript than I would inviting a colleague to sit in at the back of my lecture room and take notes and give me advice. You may feel differently. Before I hand over to Sunny, I want to come back to the stuff which the DFE are really not encouraging us to do quite so much, about this cultivating pupils' curiosity. For your pupils who are interested in a subject already, interested in a topic, whether it's within or beyond the curriculum, this is an amazing opportunity for them to get personalised tuition in a thing which they may not have any teacher at the school who knows about this as much as they are interested in this. The interfaces are just awesome. So much of what I've just shown you is very text-based. You have to be literate in order to be able to use this. Bringing it onto the phone, having these amazingly natural conversations, it's really good at speech recognition. It is amazingly good at speech synthesis and that dialogue at the heart of learning. One other example. So there's a thing in Key Stage 3 science about the production of carbon dioxide by human activity and the impact on the climate. I want you to put yourself in the place of a 13-year-old who has the parental permission to use ChatGPT or whatever tool. You say, okay, here is the historic weather data from a local weather station. Now give me a data visualization of this. Work out the average annual temperature. We get a table. How exciting is that? Okay. Work out the annual temperatures. Now show me the data visualization of this. Show me a time series. Those of you around the secondary tables know you have pupils who could do this in Excel. And learning to do this in Excel is no bad thing, but just giving a one-sentence prompt, and here is what the data actually shows us about this. And you've got the 5-year rolling average. There's a teachable thing there. And then I say, okay, do me the warming stripes visualization. Show this as color-coded vertical bars, blue for cold, red for hot. At which point my 14-year-old daughter says, Daddy, we are all doomed, aren't we? It's a sobering thought, but we're working from the data set itself rather than, let me teach you about this. And then, the thing in the spec, in the national curriculum, is about the effect of carbon dioxide on this. So I say, can you find me global CO2 concentrations for the same time period? And it says, oh yes, this is the Keeling curve data. I say, okay, give me a table of the Keeling curve data. I then say, link that table to what you've just shown me about a local weather station. And here's the Keeling curve. CO2 seems to have increased over the last 60 years, 70 years. Who knew? And then here is the scatter plot. And for each year of that period, plot me the point for the average temperature locally and global CO2 concentration. We've got about 6.59 as our coefficient of correlation. 60% of that temperature locally seems to be determined by global CO2 concentration. This is a hard thing to do the maths for, but it's very easy, I think, even for a bright 14-year-old to be able to make sense of this when they're using the technology to support them in their particular inquiry. Sunny is going to talk to you more about prompting. The two things to take away from this brief introduction to the day is how powerful the retrieval augmented generation is. You will have all had the experience if you just do what we call a zero-shot prompt. If you go in there and say, make me a lesson plan, and it makes you a lesson plan, but it's a bit rubbish, and you think, we could do better than this. If you give it stuff to work with, either what your lesson plans look like, and exam specifications, assuming copyright is okay, or national curriculum content or whatever, and say, now make me a lesson plan based on these things, it does a way, way better job.